So Enchanté Luminaries is a series of talks that I usually do on my Instagram Live. We have had 2 seasons to date. I would like to officially kick it off and thank you all for joining me. Though disclaimers हैं before I begin, I'm not a subject expert. I'm not a historian. I'm just a passionate student, and this is my topic of interest. And I wanted to talk about it and learn from you people as well. So this is not a lecture, and let's please make it interactive. I would love to hear from you in the comments and feedback as I go along with this talk. And let me know and comment and share your knowledge and information with me, because it's definitely going to add to mine. The history of jewelry in the Muslim subcontinent, which is the region that now includes India, Bangladesh, and we could even count Persia in it, because the Muslims ruled this whole area for a lot of years. It's very incredibly rich and diverse. It spans several centuries, and there are wide styles of jewelry that was adopted during this period, and it held an immense cultural, social, as well as religious significance. It was worn both by royalty and as well as the common people. It was an intrinsic part of their culture. The early history of the jewelry and gems in the Muslim subcontinent can be traced back to the arrival of Islam, which is about in the 8th century. Prior to that, it was influenced by a lot of external cultures, indigenous cultures like the Roman Empire and the Egyptians, and also Central Asia. But with the advent of Islam in the subcontinent, new forms, new techniques of jewelry emerged, and blending Islamic motifs with the area of the craft, and using local artistic traditions. I think it kind of enhanced that whole era of jewelry making. Talking about the Mughal emperors, Maharajas, and royalty, the Nawabs, they assembled a remarkable collection of precious gemstones. And it was a testament to their wealth, their power, their social status, their authority, and often their righteousness. And it also reflected, their refined taste and passion for arts. So, how did they come across these remarkable gemstones or jewelry pieces? What was the acquisition like, and were they all inherited? How did it come about? Some key factors that contribute to this origin of these remarkable gemstones in the subcontinent, in the history of the Muslim rulers, firstly was local mines. So most of us are not aware, but this region was very enriched, with gemstones. It has the history of gemstone mining, especially the Golconda region in India was known for its diamond mines. So the famous Hope Diamond and Kohinoor, they both come from India. And also the state of Rajasthan was known for its mines of emeralds, rubies, and sapphires. So it was not just, the African continent that had these origins. Secondly, trade routes. I think हम सब ने history में, बचपन में we've all learned about the traders along the Silk Trade route. So the subcontinent was always a very significant hub for traders. It attracted everybody from, for centuries because of its connectivity between the Far East, the Middle East, and Europe. So different traders, for instance, apart from other products, they also brought precious gemstones. They were bought from as far as Colombia and South America to South Asia along these trade routes, and it linked, Europe and the Middle East. Another very important factor for the origin of these gemstones and jewelry collections in the Muslim culture and subcontinent was conquests. So, I mean, in the last few weeks, there was a lot of noise at Prince Charles' coronation on the imperial crown and the Lahore diamond that is embellished in it. And there was a hue and cry, especially in the Pakistani society community online, that they should give back our due heritage, and these belong to us. So interestingly enough, the Mughal emperors, they expanded their empire through conquests, and which often resulted in acquisition of wealth, including gemstones. During the 16th century, when Babur founded the early Mughal Empire, he captured, significant treasures during his conquests, and he was not the only one. Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, they all continued to amass gemstones through their military campaigns. And also one more factor was royal patronage, because if you have read a bit of history and if you're interested in art, you would definitely know that the whole Mughal dynasty and the rulers later were all they were patrons of good art, and they used to commission artists and artisans and craft, and they often commissioned jewelers to make exquisite pieces for them, for the royal treasury. I just want to share an interesting fun fact here. So we are all aware of the famous designers of the West, right? We've all heard of Cartier and all of these amazing international brands. So it's very interesting to know that many of the Indian Maharajas, such as the Nawabs of Baroda, Nawanagar, Patiala, Indore, Jodhpur, etc., and they commissioned, they all bought jewelry from Cartier. So though it was traditional jewelry, but it was designed by Cartier, and the story goes back to Cartier's love affair with Delhi and the Indian subcontinent around 1911. When the founder of Cartier, Jacques Cartier, he was invited, he traveled to Delhi for the Delhi Darbar. It was, I think, King George V's coronation, accession to the throne, and he was sent to, as an ambassador to Delhi, and where he met the Maharaja, and he showed them the case of jewels and the kind of work Cartier was doing back then. And, it was a huge hit. Their craftsmanship and finesse of work got them, a lot of work from the Maharajas. And Jacques Cartier was invited back again, and he traveled across the subcontinent, and designing exquisite pieces for royalty in India. Not just Cartier, but other brands like Vacheron and Millerio were also commissioned by the ruling elite of the subcontinent to make pieces for them. Lastly, I think another factor that relates to the origin of these historical gemstones is inheritance. Most of them were, passed down generation to generation, and they were also given as diplomatic gifts. So back in those days, when people came to court from far off places, they brought precious commodities and precious gifts that stood out, and it often included remarkable gems. Just summarizing for those who joined later, that today we're talking about the history of the Indian subcontinent, particularly the Muslim culture, and its influence in jewelry and the gemstones and jewels of the state. I was just commenting and summarizing about how the remarkable jewels and jewelry of the Maharajas and Mughal emperors in the Indian subcontinent not only showcased their wealth and power, and it also reflected their refined taste for art. And over time, these collections became very legendary and a rich part of the cultural heritage that we have. Now I want to talk about some of the styles of jewelry making that was very popular in the subcontinent in those areas, in that era. So one of the most notable style of jewelry, that apart from the external influences, before the advent of Islam and when the Mughal Empire took off, it was Kundan jewelry. So Kundan is a technique that basically involves using uncut gemstones in gold, and it's an exquisite form of jewelry making, and it really flourished under the Mughal Empire because the artisans, between the 16th to the 18th century created, they had access to those kind of gemstones, and they made beautiful exquisite pieces, which was worn both by the nobility, the royal dynasty, as well as the common people. And it featured designs that had influence of the Islamic motifs, like florals, filigree work, and a lot of that. And combination of precious gemstones like ruby, emerald, sapphires, and diamonds. Another style of jewelry that became really popular during that era was meenakari and polki. So polki refers to uncut diamonds set in gold, and meenakari, as you know, is enameling, the art of enameling, and that is also something that is our cultural heritage. And it was we had some really fine artisans in that era, and this combination of polki and meenakari created some really intricate and vibrant jewelry pieces, which was also very popular during that era. Though I'm focused on talking more about the Muslim cultural influences, but here I'd also like to mention another form of jewelry that was popular in the subcontinent, and that was temple jewelry. So it was basically gold jewelry that showcased gods and goddesses, and highly popular in the nobility of the Sikhs and the Hindus, and even other communities living in the subcontinent at that time. So when we talk about jewelry, I'm moving on to the later part of my talk now. I don't want to drag it around and make it boring. I just move on to the second part now, which is the kind of popular pieces of jewelry that were worn during that time. So the list is pretty long, and it will, live talk can probably not do justice to it. So I want to talk about one kind of jewelry today in particular, which is the headpiece or the head ornament. The concept of the crown as symbols of royalty and authority dates back to ancient civilizations, right? We have seen that in both in the Egyptian and Roman civilizations, that there was some form of head ornament that signified the ruling elite or the kings. And in the European context, however, the crown was used though by civilizations earlier and monarchies, but it varied across different time periods and different cultures, the concept of the crown. However, it was the Persians who introduced tiaras. It was a high pointed headdress, usually made of fabric or metal, and embellished with loose gemstones that could be put on and put off. And it was a symbol of authority and signified royal status. In the West, however, wearing a tiara became popular in the 18th century, when it came into fashion in Europe by the European nobility, and it was done on formal occasions. Usually they're handcrafted in silver, gold, and platinum, and are embellished with all kinds of precious gemstones. So interesting fact about head ornaments is that though they reflect power, often righteousness, victory, triumph, and identify as an individual's political hierarchy, the more heavy the head ornament and the more bejeweled it is, the higher the ranking. So recently we all witnessed the coronation in the UK, and the imperial crown that was worn by King Charles, it was almost 5 pounds. That's like almost a 2.7 kg. Can you imagine wearing that kind of weight on your head? That's quite heavy. So, but then again, that was the concept, the heavier and the more embellished it is, it's kind of outdated. I'm sorry to make this comment, but you know, in those days, people had no other means to display their wealth. You know, there are no like in our culture. Yes, I mean you know, there are protocol cars and guards and four-wheelers and all, and you know that there's somebody important going there, right? So back then it was the heavier the crown and the heavier the head ornament, the higher your status. Actually, interestingly, the Mughal emperors from Babur, Akbar, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb, all of these had distinctive turbans, and which were decorated with statement jewels and jewelry, you know, and also plumes of feathers. That was very fashionable. And these turban ornaments, you know, they're basically two kinds, and they're called an egret and a sarpage. I don't know whether any of you had heard of these names before, but today I'd like to introduce you to them. So the crowns were not worn in the Muslim culture by the Muslim royalty, the emperors, Mughal emperors and all. Here they had instead an egret, and you know, often some of them also wore sarpage, which comes from a Persian word, which means, you know, to be tied around the head. The egret is it was a very fashionable accessory that was highly sought after because of its exquisite design and elegance, and it usually included you know, feathers of plume of feathers from the egret bird, which were known for its rarity and preciousness and other exotic birds. And along with that, it was set in you know, precious metals like gold or platinum with gemstones. And they were also not just favored by the ruling class, but also by the fashionable elite at that time. So if you're a Nawab or a Maharaja, you know, or some other dignitary, you would be wearing an egret on top of your turban. The origin of the sarpage dates back to the Mughal era, and it had Persian influence because Babur had that Persian influence with him. It became an integral part of the royal attire. It was easier, I guess, because you know, the Muslim royal attire contained a headgear. It had a head covering, and the sarpage was a cultural and fashion statement. It meant that that ornament could be put on and wrapped around the turban. Very interestingly, it's also used to date. I think a modern version of it, and I was reading about it, that it's still used by grooms in weddings. So I'm assuming that the modern version would translate perhaps into what we call a sihra today, right? And I want to share with you some images and also briefly mention, apart from the emperors, some of the notable Muslim elites and part of the aristocracy that had some remarkable jewelry collection as we move forward. I would firstly, I think, show you some pictures that I had just to give you an idea. I don't know how well you can see them in camera, but this is what an egret looks like. So this one has emeralds and diamond, and this one has those white feathers that I was talking about, feathers of an egret bird, and it's you know, attached to a turban. This one has another beautiful design. So these could all be fixed on top of your headgear or head ornament, and another one in diamonds. Some of these have gemstones that are so precious and rare that we would hardly, you know, get to see them in today's time and age. And this is what a sarpage would actually look like. So it goes around the turban. There's another one in rubies. So first and foremost, I want to talk about the Nawab of the Nizam of Hyderabad. Sorry, he had one of the finest collections of jewels, embellished with the best quality of gems, and he was very fond of emeralds, like Emperor Jahangir was, and and he had a stunning agate made out of Colombian emeralds, and because of his fascination for the gem, the large part of his collection had some of the world's most unique and huge emeralds. Another notable honorable mention is the Nawab of Rampur. So it is estimated that the value of jewels of Nawab of Rampur was almost equal, so there was obviously different regions in the subcontinent and different nobility, ruling those regions. But Nawab of Baroda was also known for his collection of jewels, and it's believed that the collection of Rampur was almost 3 times in value of Maharaja of Jaipur. And I'm just sharing this to give you an idea of how rich our cultural heritage is from the subcontinent. We normally look at museums in the West where things are well preserved, and we are not aware that the Muslims had a richer heritage, both in terms of value and art. Talking about, I want to just mention here, about the Nawab of Rampur. He had the world's finest collection of natural pearls, and some of the pieces that he had exceeded the size of a thumbnail. So if you have ever bought or window shopped for a natural pearl, you would know the kind of treasures that we're talking about here. And so the men, interestingly, not only focused on the headgear or the head ornaments when we're talking about display of wealth or display of authority or display of status, but they also wore strings and necklaces around their neck. And this pearl collection that I just mentioned, so I read that there were about almost 30 strings of pearls that were worn like a sash around the whole body. Can you imagine the weight of 30 strings of pearls around your body? But that's how they displayed their wealth and power. I also want to share another fun fact here. I think things like these add to our knowledge. One of the most spectacular jewels adorned by the royal family of Qatar at the recent coronation of Prince Charles was a head ornament. It's called the tiger's eye, and she was wearing it. It was worn by Sheikha Amna, and she was wearing it along with the Cartier necklace. And the tiger's eye had a prominent, whiskey-colored yellow sapphire, which was almost 61 plus carats in weight, which is huge, and it was discovered in South Africa. It was mounted with diamonds and I think made in platinum by Cartier in the early 30s. Interestingly, that head ornament was an agate, and it was part of Nawab of Nawagar's jewelry collection. So that was, I don't know how it got to the royalty at Qatar, but there have been some really famous historical pieces, some of which sadly are not as well preserved as they should have been. Head ornaments were not just worn by the Maharajas at that time, but also the women in the royalty. The Maharanis and the Begums and the queens also adorned head ornaments. Some of these included the Mang Tika, which was very popular, and there's also something called the Matha Patti and a Jhumar. I think these have passed on till current times, and we see them popular still for festive occasions. I have exceeded my 30-minute time limit. Usually that's the kind of time that we take for our Instagram live. There is a lot that can be added on this topic, because it is such an interesting and vast history that we haven't closely observed, and I think we all should be proud of the kind of cultural heritage that has been passed on to generations in the subcontinent. Before I wrap up, I just want to mention, because I just focused to the head ornament, and I just mentioned the Maharanis and the female royalty. So they also possessed precious gemstones that were made into rings. I'm talking about the females particularly, and they had a lot of historical and cultural importance. They were often crafted with the kind of, you know, one-of-a-kind exquisite craftsmanship, and featured really high-quality gemstones. A few examples that I want to mention here is, the first one is the Great Mughal Diamond. So it was, it's also known as the Orlov Diamond, and it was once part of the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan's peacock throne. So that's another topic for another talk, but Shah Jahan's peacock throne is famed to have perhaps the world's most precious gemstones embellished on it. And one of these was the Mughal diamond. Later on, when the throne was looted and in the conquests, so the diamond was made into a ring, and it is currently owned by the Russian nobility, and it was about 189 carat diamond, which is remarkable. The second ring that I want to mention is Nur Jahan's ruby ring. It's really famous because Emperor Jahangir, he was known for his love for fine jewelry, and he gifted her this ring, which had a very large oval-shaped ruby, and it was surrounded by diamonds and emeralds, and it was a huge ruby. It was supposed to have an exceptional value. I was searching the net to find out what happened about, to that ring, but there's no credible history. It was perhaps, after the fall of the empire, perhaps sold off to private collectors, because it's not surfaced in the jewelry world to date. The last one is the Kohinoor diamond. So the Kohinoor diamond, it's I think one of the most popular or famous diamonds that everybody has, at some point heard about. It was part of the Mughal treasury, and it was passed through generations in the Mughal Empire. It was actually made into a ring at that time, though it's a huge stone. And eventually it was after the downfall and decline of the empire, it became part of the East India Company, which was commissioned there. It was in their possession, and that's how it reached the British Crown Jewels, and it is now part of the British Crown Jewels and showcased at Tower of London. So I would like to wrap up my talk here, because I can go on talking about this topic. It's something that's really close to my heart, and also I'd like to share some of these very interesting nobilities figures that I just mentioned to you, and I think it'd be interesting just to show you a glimpse of all of these. Take a quick glance at what I want to show you here. So I mentioned the Nawab of Nizam of Hyderabad's emerald egret, and here this is. I think my window is reflecting, and I think this is better. And then there's another egret. This one is all diamonds, uncut diamonds and ruby. This is a Sarpech, again part of the Nizam's collection. This is the famous tiger's eye whiskey colored I just mentioned, that was worn by the royalty of Qatar at their coronation ceremony a few weeks back. It belonged to the Nawab of Nawagar. And here are some pictures from the nobility, so you could just see how these are worn on top of the turbans. This is a Sarpech worn by the Nizam of Hyderabad. The collection of Nawab of Hyderabad. This is an egret. Look how it's tied to the turban, and in the portrait you can even see the plumes of feathers. And there's some really interesting pictures that just show you, the kind of wealth that they had. This is the last one, I think. Oh yeah, the pearls. Please look at the necklace, look at the agate, look at the turban, and look at the size of those diamonds. This is a beautiful, stunning agate. It's tied to the turban. Look at the finish and how it's fixed and the kind of workmanship that has been done. This is the Nawab of Rampur wearing his infamous pearls, supposed to be one of the best in the world. So with this, I'd like to wrap today's talk, and I want to thank you all for joining in. I hope you found some of the information that I shared useful, and I added some to your knowledge. I'd be putting up this episode on my social media, so if you have any feedback or comment, please do let me know. Take care. Thank you all for joining me on a Sunday morning, and it was a pleasure to have you all here. Until next time, take care and have a great weekend. Thank you.